everyone. I'm Caroline Sinders. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to be presenting on a couple of different projects. The main project being Feminist Data Set, but to sort of explain how I came to that project, I really want to share some other works of mine. So I'm presenting on what I'm calling research-driven art. And hi, I'm Caroline. I'm an artist and researcher, and I work at the intersections of civil society and the private sector, looking at the impacts of technology in society and its effects on marginalized groups. I specifically look at the impacts of technology through the lens of harassment and harm reduction. I've held residencies with BuzzFeed and IBEAM, Pioneer Works, the Mozilla Foundation, Harvard University, and I currently sit on a working group with the United Nations on data privacy and children, and I'm an artist with Anna Riddler with Ars Electronica's AI lab. And generally the way that I study or look at technology is I study people and how people interact with each other on the internet. Which really brings us to this talk. What is research-driven art? It's how I define my practice. It's art that is shaped and driven by research, be it qualitative or quantitative. I don't necessarily make data visualization, but I could. Or the way I think about it is, what if you made net art or technology-based art, but with the same principles as photojournalism? Like photojournalism, research-driven art uses specific structures and a sense of purpose to constrain it. These constraints work much like how a skeleton works. They stabilize the practice just as a rib cage stabilizes the body. They do not define the entire practice, nor keep it from moving and flexing on its own. In this way, the research I do stabilizes and shapes my art, but it does not dictate the outcomes. In late May, after the United States erupted in protest for Black Lives Matter, and after George Floyd's death, a number of curators and critics remarked on social networks about tech artists, read white and male artists, and their roles in unpacking technology and justice and activism. Over email, my friend, the curator and writer Nora Khan, discussed artistic practices during moments of cultural upheaval. Nora wrote to me, how might critical technology work be called on in this moment to do more? Coded, designed work has that capacity. Hybrid research practices can explain and expose the logics of racial capitalism, but under the auspices of artistic collaboration, and can enact critique and make an argument through a built system. So let's think of it this way. This idea of usefulness and interdisciplinary work is a key and necessary part of a research-driven practice. And in my practice is directly inspired by, or rather this research-driven arts practice is directly inspired by Tanya Bruguera's arte utile methodology, which means utilitarian art. Arte utile draws on artistic thinking to imagine, create, and implement tactics that might change how we act in society. Again, heavily focused on usefulness, on tool building, and on communities. Nora, in an email to me, highlighted the strengths of work stretching across domains, of making art a necessary Trojan horse to discuss useful change. This is where I personally turn to the work of American artists, Frances Singh, Joanna Moll, Adam Harvey, Yumi Onawa, forensic architecture, and others. These artists are pulling from research or investigatory-based practices and with work that manifests into a variety of outputs, artifacts, writings, and education. The practices of American artists, or the anonymous group behind ScanMap, are great examples of social justice and human rights-driven art. With ScanMap's current work tracking police scanners, or American artists' works, If I'm Blue, if I Was blank, I Would Die, and My Blue Window, two pieces that comment on the structure and violence of the modern police forces. Other examples of social justice research and artistic practices are works like The Hidden Life of an Amazon User by Joanna Moll, or Adam Harvey's V-Frame research, which came out of his numerous collaborations with the human rights archiving group, the Syrian Archive, or the investigative work of forensic architecture. One example of a research and social justice-based art practice is Mimi Onawa's. Onawa's research work on the politics and injustices of data sets have resulted in artworks like The Library of Missing Data Sets, and the widely cited and canonical zine, The People's Guide to AI, written with Diana J. Nursia. These pieces and artists occupy a liminal space of research, journalism, and art. And in this context, design and art are the same for me. These aforementioned works can be viewed as art, design, or research, but are much more richly seen when viewed as a research-based artistic activist practice. And while that's a wordy description, it rings true to the intentions of the work. The works aren't just to bear witness, though that alone would be worthwhile. They question, provocate, and offer a solution to a problem. They should not be viewed as a form of techno-solutionism, however. The solutions the artists provide are not meant to create an end-all, be-all to all of their potential solutions, but really serve to offer temporary or open-source fixes for gaps in equity and violence created by society, and thus are poetic witnesses to those gaps. This kind of band-aid is a similar space in which I pursue my own practice. Band-aids exist as necessary provocations or patches, while with participatory design and deconstruction, artists, human rights researchers, activists, technologists, and communities can overhaul the system or destroy systems together. The togetherness and collaboration is key, though. Nonetheless, provocations within art and design can create new imaginaries for new realities. And I'd like to quickly show you some projects and explain where they came from. One art project, Social Media Breakup Coordinator, has come out of my 8 years of studying online harassment and how systems create harassment. I look at the affordances of technology. Do UX and UI decisions mitigate harassment? Can they amplify it? And I think that they can. Think about if you were being harassed, what does the system allow you to do? What can you do to create safety in that space? And can you really be safe? Some of my research focuses on the harassment of everyday users and then also journalists who can face journalists can face really large threats like governmental censorship or surveillance, all the way to what we could think of as more regular harassment, such as harassment that appears every day, such as misogynistic or racial threats or harassment campaigns. The research work I've done has been supported by different organizations like Harvard and the Open Technology Fund. Within this research, it also inspires art as well. Social Media Breakup Coordinator comes out of this space of research, of spending a lot of time studying how content moves online, of what we can do to react to it or stop it, especially in the case of harassment, but how people also just relate to being online, of how we as a society respond to being online, that these really structured design spaces that we exist in. What are the new anxieties and tensions that come out of these design spaces? A lot of victims, for example, regardless of technical background or job, I hear journalists say this a lot, say that they shouldn't be upset by what's said to them online. But you should be. It's okay to be hurt and affected by someone calling you dumb or sending you something as serious as a rape threat. That is supposed to hurt. So as a researcher, I look at these anxieties, and as an artist, I create explorations or interventions around them. Social Media Breakup Coordinator is a performance piece that explores the very intertwined and interconnections of our online and offline lives. This piece has gone through 3 iterations since 2015. I am exploring the connections between our digital tools and human intervention. Where do algorithms fail and humans must intervene? As users of social media, people live their most beautiful, angry, complex, and complicated lives online. I'm exploring a series of solutions following this social media breakup and how to coordinate a la a therapist, and acting like a social media coordinator for an ad agency. So I'm helping people with their social media accounts decouple this messy algorithmic intersections that are created as our lives are combined with other people's lives inside of spaces like Facebook. So like an algorithm, I'm also creating a series of solutions that can be combined for a variety of ways. What do you do following a one-night stand or a friendship breakup, ending an abusive relationship, ghosting, as well as a myriad of other things? Every participant sitting with me signs this legally binding document drafted by my collaborator, Fred Jennings of Tor Eklund Law Firm. This outlines that I am not a therapist, not held liable for damages. Then users fill out a 21-point quiz in which I prescribe answers out of an algorithm I hand wrote and with 40 different suggestions. These suggestions can be puzzle pieced together so the participant feels like they're receiving highly personal advice when in fact it's algorithmically generated. Social media breakup coordinators also comment on the United States' lack of healthcare and mental health support, as well as the growing gig economy. In this project, I'm effectively a gig economy therapist, as well as a digital security trainer and advice giver. For a few dollars in 15 minutes, people fill out a survey, and I give them real feedback. It started off as algorithmic feedback, me mimicking a live chatbot, but it really just turned into a short feedback session. And the feedback and the questions and interactions pull from my very real research of seeing the journal anxieties people had about being online. It was exploring this idea of expendable help and how anxiety about the internet isn't taken seriously, but it should be. And through this, I've created a series of public data sets about these anxieties. In February 2019, I took over Baby Castles again to host an entire month of social media breakup coordinator with new artwork, a video game arcade, and weekly talks featuring Fei Liu, Pamela Liu, Jacqueline Mabey, Charles Broskowski, Molly Soda, as well as others. Video games installed were Wrong Box by Molly Soda and Aquam, Museum of the Saved Image by Flan, Yet Another Exhausted Day by Candleman Games, Attack of the Terms of and Conditions by Mace 486, Wonders of the Internet by Let Off Studios, and Valentine Doom by Dugov Ugg and Sub-Zero. The games themselves, combined with the talks and performances, were all mediations on the problems and anxieties within social media. We created a moving algorithm projected on a wall, inspired by our workshops, and at the end of the exhibition, we displayed it. And you see here Lauren, the curator, navigating the data and the algorithm we built. I also curated a series of poster art pieces on disconnecting with technology and social media from artists and researchers like Sadet Harry, Merritt Kay, Helen Shewolf Singh, Solmia Siga, and myself. And here is a picture of me in session as the social media breakup coordinator. Later in December 2019, I won a residency with Academy Slaw Solitude, and I created a critical chatbot. The bot is designed to respond to questions and care for victims, as well as a series of open source best practices guides on what to do in facing a variety of online harassment. This bot is an extension of Social Media Breakup Coordinator. This bot also tells the users that it shouldn't exist, but it does to fill a void created by platforms, that the help and the feedback the bot is providing should really be provided by real people and trained professionals on these platforms, but that help doesn't exist. And until that kind of infrastructure exists, the bot will exist. So my work likes to play with this line of being useful, but also highlighting deeper issues at play. Higher Resolution, which ran for 2 weeks in September 2019, used interactive artwork, talks from international technology experts, and hand-on workshops to examine the state of power and privacy online, from widespread surveillance to how AI is shaping human culture and relationships, to threats of emerging technology that can pose to human rights. Artists and speakers hail from Amnesty International, Change.org, the BBC, the Carnegie Trust, and other international organizations. One of the reasons I was so excited to work with Hyphen Labs was the ability to bring in policy researchers, political activists, and watchdog groups into our artistic collaboration. It's important when creating activist and social justice-driven works as artists to avoid replicating unintentionally work done by activists out in the field. Instead, we can work directly with those activists. When fighting data surveillance, the way to create change is to work together and create levers of pressure in the public, and arts institutions are a necessary part of that lever. We need to avoid creating work alone only in the space of art, and we should seek collaboration with other activists and researchers who are working on identical causes. The 2 weeks of programming unfolded in a unique physical space designed to mimic the different layers of privacy we toggle between online, as well as creating a floor schematic highlighting privacy concerns in our everyday lives. The metaphors we created were town hall, an analog of Twitter being the most public, the park bench, an analog of Facebook being semi-public, the living room, an analog of WhatsApp being more intimate and private, and the loo or the bedroom, an analog of intimate text conversations. There are also art installations that spotlight the perils of modern technology like facial recognition, website tracking, and harmful content recommendations. And the following images display some of the different things we installed. So another example of research-driven art and social justice is my social justice art practice, Feminist Data Set, which is why we're here to talk. Feminist Data Set started in 2017 as a response to the many documented cases of problems in technology and bias in machine learning. It is a critical research and art project that examines bias in machine learning through data collection, data training, neural networks, and new forms of user interface, as well as the projected creation of a feminist AI chatbot. The project is inspired by the work of the Maker Movement, Critical Design, Arte Utile, the Critical Engineering Manifesto, Xenofeminism, and the feminist principles of the Internet. Feminist Data Set is a multi-year project using intersectional feminism as a framework for investigating machine learning. It's trans-inclusive and focuses on racial justice. It's extremely process-driven, so the outputs of the project, or the artifacts, are workshops on data and machine learning. These workshops are key since they are a mechanism to think through what community-driven, equitable data collection could look like. In these workshops, we discuss what intersectional data is and what does it mean. We talk about Professor Kimberly Crenshaw's work, the creator of the term intersectionality. We also unpack intersectional feminism in writing. For example, an article about income inequality. An intersectional feminist article would highlight that white women, black women, indigenous women, Latina women, and trans folks of all different races are paid all different amounts. So an article that simply represents all women as a monolith is not intersectional and cannot be in the data set. Within our workshops, community members then research and submit written data, be it poems, texts, blogs, transcripts of conversations, songs, whatever. The only time my hand as the creator appears is to remove non-intersectional data, and I am extremely firm about this. Racists and TERFs need not apply. Feminist Data Set operates in a similar vein to Thomas Thwaites' Toaster Project, which you see here. A critical design project in which Thwaites builds a commercial toaster from scratch, from melting iron ore to building circuits and creating a new plastic body mold. Feminist Data Set, however, takes a critical and artistic view on software, and particularly machine learning. What does it mean to thoughtfully make, to carefully consider every angle of making, iterating, and designing? Every step of this process needs to be thoroughly re-examined through a feminist lens, and like Thwaites' toaster, every step has to actually work. Here's an image from when Feminist Data Set was installed in the Victoria and Albert Museum in the Artificially Intelligent exhibit. My current project, named TRK, or Technically Responsible Knowledge, is an open source project that examines wage inequality and creates open source alternatives to data labeling and training in AI, and is a part of the Feminist Data Set project, now focusing on data labeling and the systemic issues around labor, invisibility, and the creation of maintaining data structures and training data algorithmic models. TRK was funded by the Mozilla Foundation and was created with Cade Diem, Ian Arnaud Fuma, and Rainbow Unicorn. Over 2019, I interviewed research labs, artists, startups, and startups who use Mechanical Turk-style services, and microservice workers across Crowdflower, Fiverr, and Mechanical Turk. I even became a Mechanical Turker myself for a few weeks. TRK is this alternative open source tool for dataset labeling and training, a time-consuming but integral aspect of machine learning that must be completed in part by a human. The tool offers a wage calculator to help visualize a livable wage to those that will then be responsible for completing the tasks. As an artist who uses AI as a material to explore and make art, I was struck by how many startups, research labs, and artists use Mechanical Turk-style platforms without any thought given to the payment structure determined for workers on the network. Mechanical Turk and similar platforms have had well-documented cases of horrendous worker-related issues, such as severely underpaying contracts. In many instances, even if a lab or individual is trying to price equitably, the interface of Mechanical Turk works against it. If the machine learning pipeline is death by 1,000 cuts, think of TRK as one band-aid for one very small cut. The project doesn't propose a solution for all issues related to machine learning, or even a major one for Amazon's Mechanical Turk. So many issues related to machine learning are issues of a deeper, more ingrained societal inequity, which can only be addressed through large shifts and restructuring in society or legislation. But within that, as a designer and researcher, I try to look at what kinds of research work can help alleviate or expose these issues. TRK focuses on how, through pricing structures, platform incentives, and the invisible nature of gig work, clients underprice, undervalue, and fundamentally misunderstand how tasks are handled in these human as a service platforms. Part of the design thinking behind TRK is to examine equity and transparency within interfaces in the design of tools, what kinds of problems tool design, UX, and UI create in technology. Inspired by the data sheets for datasets white paper, TRK injects plain text information into the dataset with information that includes a description of what the dataset is and when it was made. UX, or user experience design, is a utilitarian intelligence, focusing on architectural layouts, usability, and user flows, but the design has a politics to it. It can suppress or uplift content. Design, much like technology, isn't neutral. As an artist, I use design as a material to confront and comment on the slickness and inequity of for-profit technologies. Like writing code, I view design as a necessary tool for making how I want to interact with the internet. And so it's very similar, I guess, in a way to Arte Utile. I'm an artist that deals with trauma and the trauma and violence of others. And sometimes the tools I use don't quite work well. So what could I do to make them better? An interface is useful and expressive. I've noticed, well, I'm an American that's based in Europe, and I'm not sure where any of you are based, but I've noticed culturally how the United States relates to design as an artistic medium versus Europe, and design is not necessarily viewed as an artistic practice in the US. I encourage you to reflect back on critical design, the methodology of removing capitalism from the structure of design. Design can be a tool, much like technology, and much like art, to create political small acts of resistance and change. What kinds of design can we make when we stop viewing it through this Western, Silicon Valley, neoliberal, and extremely capitalist lens? We've seen code and art made without the constraints of capitalism. It's time for design to do that. Critical design, social justice, and design justice are needed now more than ever for tool making, for design to confront how it's perpetuated white supremacy and to change its relationships to power. Design can be an actuator for change, but design alone is not an entire solution towards injustice in society and technology. Design can confront a problem while it is acknowledging that it is a part of the problem. Design can visualize or highlight parts of systemic injustice, but design must unpack and confront its role in contributing to injustice in technology, especially technology in Silicon Valley. I use design as an artistic practice and a lever to create usefulness to explore problem solving. Similarly, how anonymous programmers created ScanMap to provide a solution for surveilling the police, and Everest Pimpkin's tool to blur images for people to use at protests, design can sit in a space to solve small problems that are a part of bigger spaces and bigger issues. So I see design as political as code and policy in this way. My approach to design thinking proposes a decommodification of art and situate it as a process and investigation. Artistic approaches to problems allow for collaborations that might not happen in other fields, and in this way, art's role in social justice and human rights projects makes space for new kinds of work in a way that other fields traditionally could not let those projects exist. What does change look like? It has to be interdisciplinary across many fields of art, activism, policy, and social justice working together and not separately. Thank you so much for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd love to chat. Feel free to drop me a note if you feel so inclined. Thank you.